world felt quiet, a voice once clear, until beauty
I have a
from
special
ashes
episode lined up
dried a
today,
tear.
all about the love
Then
that held
broken
me together.
silence,
But
lost
before
and
we open that up,
afraid,
I
trying to
wanted to
rebuild
add
after
some
life changed
context
everything
to
that
last
day.
week's episode.
Remember
After
the
it
heavy
dropped, I
red cloak
realized that there
and
was
the
a
long
crucial piece of information that was missing. And so I just want to add that little bit real quick. So when I spoke about the package that arrived on my doorstep, one of the items in that package was my high school letter jacket. I did not want my jacket because it did not hold any good memories for me at all. And during this particular period of time, I had been asking my sister for Gavin's t-shirts. I had wanted to have a quilt made out of all of his shirts. It had been around 2 years at that particular point in time. And I had been asking for his shirts. And I had also asked for one of his 4 guitars. I asked them to be sent to me, and I offered to even pay for all of the shipping. So for 2 years, the subject of his shirts and guitar, that subject was completely ignored or kind of skirted around. And I would never get, hey, I'm going to send them on this day, or any communication regarding them. But they were quick to send me items that I specifically requested something else be done with. And there's a painful irony in the fact that items tied to my past trauma were sent to me with like absolute urgency. Yet my own son's actual meaningful belongings were basically treated like an afterthought. And it really showed me exactly where their priorities were. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that it was basically like weaponized efficiency. So holding the weight of that kind of dynamic is actually what I want to give honor to today. So when you experience that kind of selective and completely conditional effort, it really makes you grateful for the people in your life that do exactly the opposite. And that brings me into today's episode. Today, I want to take some time to honor my husband, the man who didn't let things fall apart when everything else basically fell shattered. So, July 6th marked 5 years of marriage for us. And while this podcast is about my journey through grief and healing, um, none of it would have been possible without the man who's been sitting with me through it all. And this episode is for him. So, my husband and I met in a very non-conventional way. We actually met online, but not like on a dating app or anything like that. In November of 2020, I had just moved into an apartment, a new apartment, and I had to hook up my washer and dryer by myself. And so, because I was in my like, I'm an independent woman, I don't need no man, little era, I took a video of it and I posted it on TikTok. And back then, I used to use TikTok a lot on my off time to pass time. And I didn't really have a lot of friends where I lived. Didn't really have a lot of friends other than the people that, a few of the people that I worked with. So that was kind of just kind of what I did to pass the time. Anyway, I was very particular being in law enforcement that people who followed me were, I like kind of always did a little bit of deeper dive in like their profiles and stuff. And so I got this follow and I was like, who is this? And I was like, oh, this person doesn't have any videos, but they have their Instagram attached to their profile. So I clicked on the Instagram and I was like, oh, it's another officer. Looked through all his profile and I was like, okay, he has kids. He looks like he takes care of them or has a decent relationship with them. Um, and that was it. Followed him on Instagram and I just moved on. So come, I think it was late February of 2021, I posted a picture of this painting that I had done as a Valentine's Day gift for an ex-husband. And said ex-husband's response to that painting was basically not what I was expecting. Like the man basically thought it was disgusting and distasteful and didn't really want anything to do with it. And so I really, for a while, had felt ashamed about the painting. Like maybe I had done something wrong. And anyway, it was a whole big thing. But I posted a little story about that painting and, kind of as my, I was feeling empowered at the moment. And anyway, this person sends me or he comments on the painting and asks me how much. And I just told him it's not for sale. So that prompted some direct messaging back and forth. At the time, I was trying to get out of some debt from a previous relationship that left me in a lot of debt. And I was just doing everything I could to get all of that taken care of because that ex person was not going to help me with anything. So I told him it wasn't for sale, but I started asking, well, how much would you be willing to pay for it? Because then I was like, I could make a side hustle and all of this. Anyway, long story short, it opened up a lot of communication between the two of us and we started building a friendship. And it got to the point where we finally exchanged phone numbers. And this was at the end of March. So we exchanged phone numbers and it became like a daily communication. We would talk, text, and every day after work, we started video chatting. And then one day he asked me if I'd ever been on vacation and would I want to go on vacation with him. And my answer to that was no, because I don't know you. And I remember him telling me, well, you're a cop, I'm a cop, and I was like, exactly. I know how cops are. I don't know you. And so in this time, I will just say we had a lot of very deep conversations. I was very comfortable with sharing everything with him about my past, about what I was currently going through. He just made it very easy for me to talk and share and never made me feel like I needed to be embarrassed or that I wasn't enough or that I was stupid for anything that I had put up with. Um, so then one day after I told him no a second time about the vacation, he asked me if I was going to be busy on like May 5th. And mind you, it's like the first week of May by this time. And I was like, no, I don't have any plans. Why? And he's like, well, I'm going to come and meet you. And he sent me the itinerary of his flight. And so he came, we met, we spent that whole week together. Um, every hour that I wasn't at work, we went out, we talked, we had a lot of fun. And before he left, he was like, since the dating pool was such trash and we have a really great friendship, we should just get married. And so I said, okay. And so he went back to Cape Canaveral where he was living at the time. And I stayed in Texas. We continued to talk. We continued to talk about, oh, well, what is the future going to look like? And long story short, he decided to move back to Texas with me way before he had initially planned. And we ended up getting married 2 weeks after he moved. He moved like the weekend of June 18th, I think. And then July 6th, we got married. And we have been married ever since. When he got to Texas, our ultimate goal at that time was, by 2023, we wanted to buy a house. He was still looking for a job while we were in Florida. I was still employed at the department I was at. But some things were going on, and I just decided, you know what? I'm tired of the BS. If there's anywhere you could live, where would it be? And he mentioned going back to Florida because he has a good support system here, not just with his friends, but with the VA and all of those things. So we moved to Florida. And still, when we got here, we got married in July of 2021. And we moved here, we moved to Florida in August of 2022. Our goal was still to look into hopefully buying a house by 2023 sometime, and then just continue to move forward from there. But ultimately, December of 2023 came, and that kind of put a halt on a lot of the things that we had talked about. And not that it completely took them off the table, we just weren't really sure where to go at that point. But prior to that, I will tell you that we used to laugh on a daily basis. We used to go out and have so much fun doing absolutely nothing, like literally. We would be laughing from the time we walked into a grocery store to the time we were getting into the Jeep. There just was never really a dull moment. And it was just like having the best friend I never knew I needed with me 24/7. Um, it was a great time. We would take walks together. Um, at the time, we would go to the gym sometimes together. And that was not the regular gym. It was just the gym at our apartments because I refused to go to like whatever gym he was a member of. He went to that by himself. That was on him. But things were just really good. We had goals, we had plans, we got along great. And When we moved to Texas, things just continued to move in a positive and upward direction. You know, we both had different jobs when we first started, and each time we left one job to go to another, it was for something that was going to be a better opportunity, better pay, better benefits. It was always something that was increasing our quality of life. And then, you know, the day that everything changed, Jamal had to step in and do things that I could no longer do. For instance, with people were calling, I needed him to talk on the phone. There were certain people that I just didn't have the capacity to think. I would have to have him make certain phone calls. Um, but what I noticed is that he immediately shifted into the protector role, but still simultaneously grieving the loss as well. And what I learned is that when tragedy hits, love is really forced to undergo like a really painful reinvention. Because in the beginning, our love was based on our connection, the shared joy that we had, and what I always refer to as like an easy piece that we started out with. Because the man brought me so much peace with little effort. But then grief and brokenness entered the room, and it suddenly went from a place of comfort to feeling more like an exercise of endurance, if you will. Because when we first got married, I would describe our love as very much like a mirror. We reflected one another's happiness and energy. And I think that we both learned that during heavy, heavy grief, like the mirror kind of fails. Um, I would describe myself as having been on many days just very numb and very dissociated. And he would be quiet, and without speaking for him, based on what I saw, maybe confused in the pain that he was feeling, because it was kind of like we had just become complete strangers overnight. We weren't just grieving Gavin, but I was grieving everything before December 21st. And I know that, I'm pretty sure that my husband was grieving those things as well, plus who I was to him prior to that day. And so, with all of this going on, we are also grieving the loss of the dynamic that we once had. And it shifted from loving a person who once was to learning how to love the stranger that they had become. And it's a lot harder to accept that than, one might actually believe, until you're actually in that situation. But we survived, and I'm going to say that I believe we survived because we both understand grace. And he recognized that the path that I was on was not betrayal, but rather survival. This man stayed awake with me many, many nights in just pure silence. I would cry, and he would consistently wrap me in his arms and tell me that we are going to get through this. It was never you are going to get through this. It was always we. He would stay awake when I was asleep just to make sure that I was getting sleep. He drove me to all the places I had to go, no matter how far it was, no matter if he had to take time off of work to do it, when I just could not find the strength to drive myself. Um, this man who was used to having his coffee made for him every morning and dinner cooked every night never once complained when he was eating a pre-made factor meal that had to be put in the microwave. He didn't complain about his coffee not being ready when he left for work. He just went with it. And he went with it in silence. He went to work every single day. He would call me and text me throughout the day. And if I even made any notion that I was in a bad place that day, he would just leave work and come home. And he would do that all without me even saying a word. I didn't have to tell him or ask him to come home. As soon as he understood that I was not in a good place, he was coming home. And my understanding of love really changed in those moments, because throughout my life, I always felt that in order for me to be loved, there always had to be certain conditions. Now, my love that I gave was unconditional, but the love that I received always felt like it had conditions, regardless of it being from my family, from friends, or past relationships, marriages. And it really came to the forefront in April of last year, 2025. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is the story that really, really tested us, and really, it just really brought a lot into perspective. This is probably the one and only what I will call fight that we have ever had. So at the time I was working nights, and my schedule at that time was midnight to 8 a.m. So I would go to bed. I don't know what time I would go to bed. Probably like 7. I don't know. Wake up at midnight, go clock in for work. And generally, within 30 minutes of me clocking into work, he would come upstairs, tell me good night, and he would go to bed. And that particular night, I got up, went to work, clocked in, and I got an email that my schedule was going to be changing come June. And I was upset and irritated, and I was kind of just losing my shit. And so I'm texting him. And usually when I would text him from work, because I had to be on, if it wasn't my break time, I couldn't just take a break as soon as I clocked in. So I would text him, and he didn't respond. And I was like, okay, didn't think anything of it. My break usually came at 2:00. I still had not gotten any response from him. And I had texted him probably like 3 or 4 times at this point. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go on my break and I'm going to go downstairs and he's going to be asleep. Well, I go downstairs and he's not there. So I'm like, what in the heck is going on? So I walk through the downstairs. I look in the downstairs bathroom. He's not there. So I walk back upstairs thinking, oh, maybe he went to sleep and just didn't hear his phone, because sometimes he'll put his phone on the charger and not pay attention to it. Or sometimes his service just doesn't like my text messages when he's in the house. I don't know. So he's not upstairs. So I'm still on my break and I call him and he answers his phone. And immediately, what do I say? Where the F are you? Oh, well, he went for a drive. He ended up stopping at a sports bar, having a drink. And by drink, I mean having a Coke. He didn't have any alcohol. And then drove home. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. However, I am completely triggered. And I am cussing this man out because why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know? Why are you not responding to my texts? And he's trying to tell me, and I'm just cutting him off left and right because I am not hearing it. Why? Because this behavior was indicative of something that had happened to me in my past where somebody cheated. And so now I am completely triggered and acting like a crazy woman because I am mentally back in the place where I was and not really in the present. So, long story short, I let him have it. I wouldn't let him talk. He got home. I told him, don't talk to me. Leave me alone. In my mind, I am already planning out. Do I need to go find a new apartment? Should I go call my son in North Carolina? Do I need to go stay with him? Like all of these things, except allowing this man to talk. And what does he do? Absolutely nothing. He just stays quiet. I did not talk to this man for 3 days. Yes, I still made his coffee. And yes, I still packed his lunch and made dinner when he went back to work on Monday. But over the weekend, I did all the things I would normally do as a wife, like cooking and stuff, but I did not have any extra conversation with him. I literally answered questions or asked the questions that I needed to ask. I did not want to communicate with him whatsoever. So Monday, he comes home and he gets off work and I'm like, we need to talk. And he's like, okay. And I said, I need you to listen to everything that I have to say. And he said, okay. And I spelled out everything. I explained the trigger. I explained why. And this man says, I know. He said, that's why I just let you do whatever it was you needed to do. I let you say whatever it was you needed to say because I knew that if I gave you the time to process all of the emotions that you were going through, that then you would come back and we would be able to have this conversation. Never once did he belittle me. Never once did he tell me that I was overreacting. And never once did he make excuses for what he should have done to make things better in that particular moment. But what I discovered in the conversation is that he had been having a very difficult time with my grieving process. He wanted to fix it. He hated seeing me the way that I was, and he didn't know how to fix it. And he told me, he said, it's just difficult because you're not the person that you used to be. You used to get up and be this way. You used to get up and say, let's do this. And you don't do any of that anymore. And I don't know how to fix things for you. And I had to tell him, I said, there's nothing you or anyone can do to fix this. I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to support me through it, especially on the days when I don't even know how I'm feeling. And at that moment, I feel like he really understood that grief really changed the whole landscape of our marriage, but it wasn't the end of our marriage. Like, we were going to have to rebuild what we wanted the future to look like because now everything has changed. And looking back, it actually, that one particular fight, if you will, it really strengthened us. You know, I am no longer afraid to share my true feelings about things. For instance, if I'm bothered, I can talk about what's bothering me, and he allows me the space to speak on it without feeling afraid or feeling like I'm going to be rejected or yelled at. For example, the other day I was made a statement about, oh, well, I need to clean up the kitchen and get all these dishes done, you know, whatever. And he was like, well, do you want me to do it? And I said, no. And I went to say something, and I don't even remember right now, like what I said, but he cut me off, and not like in a hateful way, but his tone completely shut me down. And then he asked me, like, are you upset with me? And I said, no. I said, but sometimes when I'm going to say something, you cut me off thinking that you know what I'm going to say next. I said, and that's not exactly where I'm going with it. I said, and your tone at times shuts me down. And he said, I'm sorry. He said, I'll try to do better. And then said, that wasn't my intention, and explained. But it's opened up spaces like that to where if I'm actually bothered by something, I can speak on it, and there's no gaslighting. There's no putting the blame back on me. There's no intimidation or making me feel like I just have to deal with it. I feel like our marriage survived all of this because he truly allowed me the grace to grieve in my own way. But I also allowed him the space for him to grieve in his. And while, you know, we're both grieving the same loss, we're actually walking two different paths. And at times, because we're walking two different paths, we were both lonely. But the love that we shared was not about perfection or complete understanding. It's really just been about staying on the edge by choice rather than drifting out into the darkness. And so today, Jamal. If you're listening, I just want to thank you for every tear that you have wiped from my face, every prayer that you have said over me, and every day that you have chosen to stay. And every time you've reminded me that life is still worth living. Happy 5th anniversary. And let this episode be my love letter to you, because I would not be the woman I am and am becoming without you. I love you. And to all of you listening and watching, if there's someone who has been your steady place through your darkest season, don't wait for a special occasion to tell them. Grief changes us, but gratitude heals a lot of parts of us too. So make sure that you tell them, and make sure that you thank them. Because sometimes the greatest testimony is not about surviving the tragedy, but rather it's about the people who showed up to help you survive it. You all stay blessed, and I will see you next week.